We're over here at Murphy's Taproom for another edition of Pints Policy. This month, housing, super important topic that I had to talk about, especially the last couple of years. I mean, how is New Hampshire doing in your opinion right now? Are we making steps in the right direction? Speaking with Greg Moore here, State Director for Americans for Prosperity in New Hampshire.
Yeah, housing is absolutely unequivocally one of the biggest issues facing New Hampshire today. An assessment recently said that we're 24,000 units short of where we need to be based upon the demand. And it's great. Look, it's great that so many people want to move to New Hampshire. It's great. But the challenge then is that a lot of people, particularly young people, aren't really having the chance at home ownership because these prices are just spiraling. Mm-hmm. Median home prices in New Hampshire are $500,000. That's a median home price. And you consider the impact of high interest rates and that's having on it. Basically, we're boxing out a lot of young people out of the opportunity of home ownership, which is, I think, a lot of people consider to be the American dream. And so we're here tonight. We're discussing some of the policy solutions that we can come up with and hopefully begin to have a conversation with the state legislature about making some changes and so that we can create a little more of the supply that's so desperately needed. Again, strangely enough, in New Hampshire, we have a declining birth rate. In other words, more people are dying in the state than are being born here. The reason why our state keeps growing, though, is because so many people want to move here. The recent census in 2020 said that 64% of Granite State adults were not born in New Hampshire. So
here,
right, and I'm one of them. So it's certainly a situation where a lot of people want to move into the state. Highest inbound migration rate per capita in the Northeast. There's a lot of reasons, a lot of good policies that have contributed to that. But ultimately, we have to find places where these people live. And what we found is that a lot of communities have decided that community preferences trump other people's property rights. And that's really a problem. Yeah. And they've used mechanisms like zoning and planning ordinances to block the opportunity for people to build. And because, trust me, the builders want to build. Yeah. The home builders want to just have the opportunity to keep building more units. It really is the cities and towns who are putting a kibosh on that. And
it's like an interesting problem, though, philosophically, especially as someone on the right, maybe liberty-leaning. It's how do you find that balance between making sure the people that live in these local jurisdictions, these cities and such, are able to kind of have what they want? They don't obviously want overblown with thousands of people moving in overnight with apartments, but still we need people, like you're talking about, especially with the age gap problem that we have in this state. That's going to I was speaking to healthcare professionals, and they're like, oh God, how are we going to help everyone? Granite VNA, like all these other organizations are like screaming for help, and you can't help this aging population without the younger people moving in.
There's no question. There's no question that we need a lot more workers. Again, it's first world problems. Mm-hmm. One of the things that we realize is when the two biggest problems in your state are we can't find enough people to fill all the jobs we have, and we don't have enough place to put the people who want to move here. I mean, if you consider where we are compared to the problems in other states who are dealing with rampant crime and dealing with the southern border states are dealing with challenges as well, our issues in New Hampshire pale in comparison, but they are real issues. And you talk to parents whose children have to leave the state to go find a chance to buy a house. You talk to employers who want to move to New Hampshire, and I know Governor Sununu talks about this all the time. And the public policy solution to this point, coming out of Concord, has simply been to throw more money at the problem. Throw millions and millions and millions of dollars at the problem, taxpayer dollars, essentially to bribe developers to put up with the onerous zoning and planning processes that are in place. We think that's completely a backwards process. We should be working with communities, and frankly, the legislature has to realize, look, we are not a home rule state. Cities and towns can only do that which they are specifically authorized by the legislature. And the legislature says there's a compelling public policy issue that we have to focus on, and we need to rein in these zoning and planning boards. They have every right to do that. One positive development of the last state budget is that it created what they call land use docket and superior court. One of the things that a lot of towns have been doing is just been denying things without any statutory authority. They have no legal right to deny these permits to build. And the reason why they do it is because they can do it with essentially impunity. They see that the process to actually between going to court and actually getting a resolution often takes 3 years or more. And the Chief Justice admits it. He said that land use cases go right to the bottom of the docket. And so this new policy that's been put in place, they're creating a new position for a Superior Court judge, and the process takes 5 months. You're in and out in 5 months. If you're trying to develop something, your financing can't hold together for 3 years.
Yeah.
But 5 months is a manageable time frame. Not only that, we're going to start to see a lot more consistent rulings because we're going to have one judge handling all these cases. And pretty soon, those zoning and planning boards, which have been denying these permits because they just didn't feel like they didn't fit the nature of their community, will realize that they're going to get sued and they're going to lose, and they might as well move forward with these permits, and that hopefully will help to alleviate some of the issues.
Yeah. What are some questions maybe locals across the state should be asking people running for office or coming up on state elections here in a couple weeks? So what are some questions they should maybe be asking people running?
Well, first of all, you should be trying to pin people down on whether they are on the side of protecting people's property rights, or whether they think that local preference is the right solution. Because when you often hear about local preference, it's not a majority. Oftentimes, it's just enough a vocal minority can take over a local zoning or planning board, and basically say, well, we don't want to change anything in our town, and so the candidates running, particularly those running for legislative offices and the governor, really should be asked that question. Are you on the side of property rights, people who want to develop their property, or are you on the side of the people who, that vocal minority that just comes in and screams at a local zoning and planning meeting because they don't want anything to change?
So now we're going to move over to one of the panelists for this evening's Pints Policy event, Adam Millsap. He's a senior fellow over at Stand Together. Welcome to New Hampshire. Where are you based out of?
I am based out of in the D.C. area, Stafford, Virginia.
Awesome. So when you're looking across, so New Hampshire obviously has its problems with housing. Very open discussion in that in the state. Is it similar across the country? Is New Hampshire, you feel like, in a unique situation?
I don't think it's in a unique situation. I mean, there are a lot of other states around the country and cities around the country that have these housing problems. They don't really let them build for various zoning regulations, land use regulations. New Hampshire certainly has some issues, though. I was just looking at some data earlier. It's like that the median housing price in New Hampshire is like 135% of the national median. So certainly on the higher end. And that just creates problems for people with middle income and stuff like that to find a location in New Hampshire they can live in.
Are you seeing any states making moves that you feel like are productive and maybe could be an example to look to? Maybe we don't do exactly what they're doing. New Hampshire always likes to do their own thing a little bit, but maybe that could help us in the long run.
Yeah, absolutely. There's a lot of states doing some good stuff. The biggest one that maybe you've heard of is what happened in Montana this past legislative session. So they passed a slew of different rules, and Montana's kind of like New Hampshire, very more of a rural state. A lot of very proud, independent people. Move out there, rugged, salt of the earth type folks. So it seems like a good model for New Hampshire potentially. But they did stuff around making it easier to build multifamily housing in like commercial districts. Doing things around like minimum lot sizes. They got rid of parking requirements and stuff, so you don't have to mandate parking for certain areas and stuff like that. So that, I think looking at what Montana has done could be potentially a good model for New Hampshire that'll really help add more supply to the housing market.
What are some ways that some states are kind of softening the locals to having these zoning changes? Because that's been a huge issue here in New Hampshire. I'm guarantee it's across the board, but is there something maybe we should consider there that may kind of like, okay, we're going to make it worth your while by doing this or something to that effect?
I think there's different arguments for different folks. I mean, you might appeal to the property rights argument. You should have the right to do on your property as you see fit. And a lot of people respond to that, are more like liberty-minded and stuff like that. Oh yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I should be able to, build some stuff like an ADU, on my property if I want to. There's also the argument you can use about families. A lot of parents are worried if their kids will be able to buy a house in the neighborhood when they grow up, and if grandparents want to be around their grandkids or want to be around their own kids, where you're going to have to make housing cheaper because, young families just starting out aren't going to be able to afford to live in places like New Hampshire with the housing prices the way they are. They're going to have to move, or they have to move farther out, 50, 60 miles out, which makes those kind of family connections a lot more strained. There's also just the arguments about, hey, it's just not fair to price people out. Maybe it disproportionately affects minorities or something like that, or lower income folks, and that's just not right, and so we should give them more opportunities. So there's several different arguments, and different ones I think will appeal to different groups.
Have you seen, I don't know if you've seen here in New Hampshire or anywhere else in the country, but we've got a big trends the last few years where these large multinational companies are scooping up these inexpensive properties. And New Hampshire is a big issue where there's some places you can afford in paper, but you're relying on HOAs are owned by these huge corporations. And then on the other side, these people are loaded boomers, to be a little cynical, scooping up basically whatever they want and selling whatever they want because they're able to. They're in a place where they're able to do that. How do we strike this balance so that everyone in the middle is able to kind of get into the real estate game?
Build more housing. Right, you got to build more housing for different price points. I think right now a lot of the problems is it's hard to build the more affordable entry level housing, stuff that goes on the smaller lots, maybe a 1,500 square foot, 2-bed, 1-bath starter home or something like that. Those are just not really profitable to build in a lot of places because of the rules around it, the permitting rules, and then you think about minimum lot sizes. My understanding is New Hampshire, a lot of places has 3-acre minimum lot sizes. Well, no one's going to put a 1,500 square foot house on a 3-acre lot.
Yeah.
Right. So you got to be able to build on smaller lots. Half acre, quarter acre, fifth of an acre, right? So until you start bringing those lot sizes down, it's going to be difficult to build the kind of starter homes that a lot of young families are going to be looking for. As far as the big corporations, the best way to keep the big corporations out, or people who are speculating on houses, is to make houses not a good investment. And the way to make houses not a good investment is to have a lot of them, so that they're not appreciating by 8% a year, 10% a year, 12% a year. If houses are appreciating with inflation 2 to 3% a year, then it's not going to be a good investment, and no one's going to be speculating in property. It's going to be available for people who want to buy it and actually live in it. But until we bring the prices down and bring the price increases down, then there's always going to be people out there who look at it as an investment comparable to stocks.
All right, Adam Millsap, Senior Fellow at Stand Together, thanks for joining me.
Thanks a lot for having me. I appreciate it.
Joined now by New Hampshire Representative Joe Alexander here, who's going to be speaking on the panel tonight for Pints Policy. So, what are some things coming up in the next State House session that you're looking to kind of put in front of people so they start considering changes for housing?
Well, the speakers led on this issue by appointing a special committee that deals with this issue. If you look at public polling, where the voters are at, where New Hampshire is, everybody states housing is their number one concern. Specifically the lack of housing. So that's something that hopefully we're dealing with this year in a couple different ways. But we're trying to be creative about this because the idea is everyone agrees we need more housing, but there's disagreement on how we get to that point and who does it and where it goes and what type of housing it is and all that stuff. So I'm excited for this panel because it's kind of a good discussion around, I think we need an all-of-the-above approach, a bunch of different things.
Do you think we need leadership from the state level to get municipalities to start making changes that are needed?
Well, I think that's part of it, but I also think there's a lot of things identified in the special committee where the state agencies are ones that are holding up the approval of housing. I mean, specifically, I have a bill in about driveway permits, and I have a approval by default bill. After 30 days, if the DOT hasn't acted, the driveway permit is considered approved. So there's a lot of ways state agencies slowing things down. So yes, municipalities, but also we got to put our money where our mouth is with the state agencies and make sure that they're doing what they need to do as well.
So say 40 people, that's 40 candidates for planning board and zoning board. Stop sitting on your butt bitching about it and go change it. Greg and AFP don't want to see taxes raised. They go knock on doors. They elect candidates. They put muscle behind their mouth. So from the home builders' perspective, what we're saying is, do something about it. Stop bitching about it and go fix it. I say that to my builders all the time. Earlier today I met with DES because there's a little rule change that got approved through a consent calendar. For one development for 21 homes, it's going to cost them an additional $250,000. And they just said, well, we're just trying to protect the environment. The same people who are telling you we want affordable housing, they just want it in your community. Those folks who say that, oh, we need workforce housing, They want it in your community, not theirs. Notice the towns with the strictest zoning? Hanover, Durham, Portsmouth, Keene. Noticing a trend, folks? They want it in your town. We're trying really hard. We're working hard. We're working with the New Hampshire Corrections Department to increase labor. We're talking to every community out there saying a job in the trades is worth it. You will make money. It's forums like this where you folks come out and vote in your town and say, what are you going to do about it? What are you going to do for zoning? Simple things, folks. Allow ADUs in your communities. If you have a 6-bedroom house or room over a garage, make it into a unit. You can stay in your home longer, you provide housing. It's there. We are trying, but it is that red tape again and again and again and again.
Okay. All right, speaking of Drew Cline, president of the Josiah Bartlett Center for Public Policy. Great panel. I mean, it's fascinating. I mean, to me, it seems like a big difference between housing and some of the other issues we talked about is there are solutions that can be done at the local level that people can actually jump on this election.
People have the power to fix this problem at their local community level. It's really not that hard. It just takes the willpower, and it takes a lot of myth busting. There's just so many myths around the housing issue that it takes a lot of conversation and persuasion.
The Q&A was fascinating. I mean, what are some of your takeaway from the questions that you heard?
Well, I mean, I think, again, it's a lot of myth busting, right? So we hear, this is what we get a lot on feedback is, well, if we build housing, it's just going to explode our school budget. But that's actually not typically true. If people think that apartments have a lot more kids than single-family neighborhoods, they don't, on average. So there's just all kinds of misperceptions out there that cause people to vote against new housing because they just have bad information.
And there must be a ton of data on this stuff, too, especially at the Bartlett Center.
There is. At the jbartlett.org, we have some. The Harvard Joint Center for Housing Studies, Mercatus Center. There's like a ton of research out there on housing. And you can, so if you're really looking for the data, you can find it.
Thanks so much. Yeah, great.